faithfully delivering value, interpreting great books from around the world. Hello, this is Sally's Book Talk. Today, the book we're discussing for you is Bad Blood, a nonfiction work with the subtitle Secrets and Lies of a Silicon Valley Giant. The protagonist of this book is Elizabeth Holmes. In 2004, she founded a company called Theranos, claiming to have developed a revolutionary technology that could perform 250 medical tests with just one drop of blood, including cancer, blood panels, immune markers, and more. Her company grew into a $9 billion Silicon Valley unicorn in just 10 years. Elizabeth herself was hailed as the female Steve Jobs, and a host of business and political heavyweights, including former U.S. Secretary of State Henry Kissinger and media mogul Rupert Murdoch, joined her prestigious board and investor lineup. Just as people were expecting Theranos to become the next Apple or Google, a truth began to emerge. The revolutionary technology Theranos claimed was fictional. This business myth was a complete scam. After the scam was exposed, this unicorn company collapsed overnight. Elizabeth surrendered herself, and investors lost $1 billion on this project. It must be said, the author of this book is John Carreyrou, a reporter for the Wall Street Journal who has won the Pulitzer Prize twice. In 2015, Carreyrou wrote an article in the Wall Street Journal, first publicly reporting on the Theranos scam. Then he spent 3 more years writing Bad Blood. This book not only recreates the entire Theranos scam, but also details the process of exposing this fraud. After its publication in the US in 2018, the book was hugely popular and was named a Best Book of 2018 by major media outlets like The Washington Post, Time Magazine, The New York Times, and Book Review Weekly. So, how was this nearly $10 billion scam meticulously crafted? How could a Stanford dropout girl with no medical background deceive a group of American business and political elites? What difficulties did the Wall Street Journal encounter in reporting this, and what principles did they uphold? Next, we'll uncover Elizabeth Ann Holmes one by one. Born in 1985 into an elite American family, she was highly competitive from a young age and aspired to be a billionaire by age 9. That was at a family gathering where each child was asked what they wanted to be when they grew up. Elizabeth said without hesitation, "I want to be a billionaire." The adult asked, "Why not become president?" She replied,
No, the president will marry me because I'll have $1 billion.
In 2002, Elizabeth was admitted to Stanford University's chemical engineering program with the highest presidential scholarship. But in 2004 spring, just after becoming a sophomore, Elizabeth dropped out and founded the company name Theranos was formed by combining the English words therapy and diagnosis. Theranos's vision was simple: design a portable product allowing people to perform most blood tests at home with just a finger prick. Patients wouldn't need regular hospital tests, enabling doctors to adjust medication in real time based on their condition. Imagine this product as an advanced home glucose monitor, palm-sized but capable of far more tests than just blood sugar. This vision stemmed from Elizabeth's childhood fear of needles. She knew many shared this fear. Moreover, Elizabeth found traditional blood testing too inefficient. She wanted to make it faster and simpler. So with seed money from her father and neighbors, Elizabeth recruited a doctoral senior and launched. In a desolate California industrial park, she devoted herself entirely to entrepreneurship. Soon, her vibrant persona and ambition to revolutionize healthcare won over investors and industry elites. Employees from top firms like IBM and Apple, inspired by Elizabeth's passion and vision, joined her ranks. One employee poached from Apple said, "Elizabeth is passionate and knows what she's doing, exactly what you want in an entrepreneur." But Elizabeth's dream was too grand. In medicine, performing multiple tests with one drop of blood had been pursued by thousands of researchers worldwide for over 20 years. Yet it remained impossible because different tests required distinct methods, A single drop couldn't suffice. Elizabeth's first product development lead was Edmund Koo, born in Hong Kong and renowned in Silicon Valley. Tech giants consulted him on complex engineering problems. But at Theranos, Koo faced the toughest engineering challenge of his career. The product designed by KU worked as follows. Patients prick their finger, place the blood sample in a credit card-sized cartridge, insert it into a reader, where a pump draws blood into microchannels for filtration and separation, leaving plasma to react with antibodies. The chemical reaction results would display and transmit to doctors online. But Elizabeth demanded two non-negotiables: only one drop of blood and a compact machine, a nearly impossible mission. Standard blood tests require 3 to 5 milliliters. Using just one drop meant diluting with massive saline doses, inevitably compromising accuracy. Additionally, miniaturization required designing non-interfering, contamination-free fluid pathways in a palm-sized space. Reactions then had to occur through precisely controlled microvalves.
Whose team kept failing? And with expensive materials, Elizabeth's patience ran thin.
She blamed laziness and demanded 24/7 work.
After Koo refused, the entire team was fired.
Elizabeth hired a second team that finally produced a device. It modified Koo's design, keeping cartridges and readers, but replaced valves and pumps with a robot handling reactions. But this robot was primitive, a mechanical arm on a frame with basic directional movement. In tight spaces, it couldn't achieve precision. Inaccuracy from insufficient blood volume remained unresolved. Thus, testing the same patient twice could yield wildly different results. The machine frequently broke, crushing cartridges or snapping pipette tips. One disassembling employee called it something an 8th grader would take her up in a garage.
For Elizabeth, at least they had a product. She named it Edison with high hopes.
Yet, this wildly unreliable Edison only handled immunoassays, shattering her dream of hundreds of tests. So she recruited a third team to develop a device called MiniLab. The principle was simple. To test for cancer, blood panels, and more, they bought existing machines on the market, studied them, and planned to miniaturize them all into one box. In reality, MiniLab was never completed before Theranos collapsed. Identically critical. Ironically, Elizabeth never created a product achieving the company's vision, yet her funding ballooned as she became Silicon Valley's queen. Over Theranos' 15-year existence, from 2004 to 2018, it raised nearly $500 million USD, equivalent to about 3.5 billion yen. The company was valued at $9 billion, with Elizabeth's personal net worth reaching nearly $5 billion. Theranos' supporters were equally star-studded. Former Secretaries of State George Shultz and Henry Kissinger served on the board. Media mogul Rupert Murdoch, Oracle founder Larry Ellison, a Mexican billionaire, Greek shipping magnate, and African diamond dynasty were among her investors. And they poured a total of $1 billion USD, about 7 billion yen, of real capital into this company. How did she maintain this gilded fraud for 15 years? Next, we'll analyze Elizabeth's tactics through internal and external dimensions. First, within Theranos, Elizabeth implemented 4 escalating control measures to suppress truth: information isolation, employee surveillance, threats, and termination with legal retaliation. Information isolation meant Elizabeth alone held full knowledge. Departments were barred from communicating, with computer networks deliberately segmented. Employees were siloed like vertical shafts. Cross-department messaging was impossible. For example, engineering and chemistry teams working on the same machine couldn't exchange information. When test results failed, they couldn't even identify whose fault it was. Even if someone suspected problems, information isolation prevented seeing the full picture. Suspicions remained unverified. Employee surveillance was another standard tactic. She hired an administrative assistant specifically to log clock-in-out times. The administrative assistant would also add employees on Facebook and report their posts to Elizabeth. Additionally, she instructed executives to regularly check employees' emails and web browsing history. When a department executive resigned, she even encouraged staff to dig through that person's documents and emails, offering promotion to whoever did so. In this culture, suspicions and discontent about Theranos couldn't be shared with colleagues, let alone outsiders. What if someone questioned Elizabeth directly? The result was termination. In year 3, the CFO suspected Theranos fabricated partnerships with pharmaceutical companies. When he confronted Elizabeth, she fired him for lacking teamwork, without explanation. Office rumors then claimed the CFO embezzled funds. Finally, before leaving, porn was found on his work computer. Elizabeth publicly cited this as the reason for his dismissal and withheld his stock options. Later, even showing doubt or insubordination got employees fired. At Theranos, people constantly vanished. Colleagues eating lunch together today would be gone tomorrow, and you'd never know why. Elizabeth's boyfriend, Sonny, over 40 and domineering, became Theranos VP, her enforcer. Whenever someone questioned a company, Sonny sent security to display the employee's badge in communal areas. That person had to leave immediately. Some were even carried out by security.
Dragged out.
Initially, Elizabeth initiated layoffs. After a turning point, employees left voluntarily. Her decision to commercialize the wildly inaccurate R&D phase devices for patients. To many, this crossed moral boundaries. It was like putting an unfinished bus into service. People would die. Mass resignations followed. Founding members, core engineers, Elizabeth's close friend, and all Apple recruits. Yet even after leaving, none could speak ill of the company. Because of severe legal deterrence, Theranos' biggest expense wasn't R&D, but legal fees. Elizabeth paid $900 million in legal service fees, equivalent to 6.3 billion yen. She hired America's most expensive, toughest lawyer, David Boies, and his firm. Boies once defeated Microsoft and represented a U.S. president in court. Departing employees had to surrender and destroy all emails and chat records. They couldn't take a single piece of paper or mention Theranos on LinkedIn profiles. Most critically, they signed extreme NDAs. Violations meant facing astronomical lawsuits. These were Elizabeth's internal control tactics. Layered restrictions preventing employees from exposing company issues. Externally, Elizabeth maintained the fraud through 3 means: her personal charisma, corporate packaging, and lying. Elizabeth was a charismatic entrepreneur. One employee described her face as unnaturally mature for her age, with big blue eyes trained to stare unblinkingly, making you feel like the world's center, almost hypnotic. Her voice amplified this effect, an unusually deep baritone. Yes, you heard right, baritone. Her TED Talk remains online. Her deep voice is indeed unforgettable. Some called her the smartest boss they'd ever seen. Someone who could sell ice to Eskimos. As an entrepreneur, Elizabeth deeply believed she could realize her dream and worked frantically toward it. She slept just 4 hours nightly, chewing chocolate and coffee beans all day for caffeine. This manic energy captivated American political and business titans. Elizabeth initially entered this circle through professors and her father's friends. After meeting former Secretary of State George Shultz, she connected through him with heavyweights like former defense secretaries, Navy admirals, and Senate Armed Services Committee chairs. She meticulously cultivated relationships with these moguls, gifting them shares in exchange for support. Serving on the board, these titans treated Elizabeth like a beloved granddaughter. This extraordinary trust manifested during a board coup attempt. Early on, 2 employees reported Elizabeth's fraud to the board. The first time, directors ignored it. The second time, they convened a full board meeting, making Elizabeth wait outside. Ultimately, the board agreed she was too young and inexperienced and should resign as CEO. But then the unbelievable happened. Over the next 2 hours, Elizabeth convinced directors she recognized management failures, promising change, transparency, responsiveness, and no repeats. She skillfully used contrition and charisma to regain 4 directors' trust. From then on, her position was unshakable. Elizabeth's second tactic, corporate packaging. After funding, she relocated to Silicon Valley's prime location, facing HP, leasing Facebook's former building near Stanford. This worked brilliantly. Image is everything in Silicon Valley. She spent heavily on marketing, hiring Apple's ad agency for $6 million yearly. They transformed her image from a jeans-wearing girl into a female Steve Jobs exclusively in black turtlenecks and pants. They packaged Theranos products with Apple-like minimalism. Theranos, from website to founder, became ultra-polished. Elizabeth expertly leveraged media connections. Through politically connected board members, she accessed elite media outlets and gave endless interviews. Soon, she exploded in fame, named to Time's 100 most influential people. President Obama appointed her U.S. ambassador for global entrepreneurship. Elizabeth's meteoric rise also fed public desire to see a woman succeed in male-dominated tech.
Elizabeth's third tactic, lying.
Early on, she crafted a plausible profit model, partnering with pharmaceutical companies. Selling Theranos devices to pharma firms would let patients test drug reactions at home, saving up to 30% in R&D costs. Theranos could make a fortune by taking a cut of that. Elizabeth did negotiate with major corporations like Pfizer, but pharma companies required Theranos devices to pass validation, proving effectiveness. However, Theranos never cleared this hurdle, so collaborations naturally fell through.
But Elizabeth publicly claimed these deals were signed, logging millions in the company books to lure investors.
In the third funding round, Theranos was valued at $165 million. Why? Because Elizabeth told investors she'd secured 6 pharma deals, generating $120, $300 million within 18 months, with 15 more negotiations promising $1.05 if successful. In reality, zero revenue materialized, and Elizabeth rebranded failures as achievements. For instance, failed deployments in Afghanistan war zones and Mexico's swine flu epidemic were presented as successes. Featured in her PowerPoints, when investors demanded live demos, she'd show pre-recorded results since Edison kept failing, but deception couldn't sustain operations forever. When funds ran out, they relied on loans from Elizabeth's boyfriend, VP Sonny. Commercial partnerships remained the long-term solution. Here, Elizabeth secured 2 partners, Walgreens, a U.S. pharmacy chain, and Safeway, America's largest supermarket chain. When Elizabeth promised Theranos' product was commercially ready, both companies created in-store blood test zones. One invested $50 million in equipment. The other committed 1,700 nationwide locations. But Theranos' product was a non-functional prototype.
So Elizabeth told a massive lie, buying third-party machines for the lab and pretending they were Theranos.
A Siemens sales rep noted Theranos was a major buyer. Ultimately, 2/3 of Theranos' tests ran on others' machines.
In practice, Theranos users required not just finger-prick blood draws, but venous draws too, with samples shipped to headquarters. Results took 2 weeks and were often inaccurate. Another of Elizabeth's lies involved regulation. Theranos always operated in a gray area.
Under U.S. law, clinical labs serving patients are regulated by CMS, Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, while commercial testing devices fall under FDA, Food and Drug Administration, oversight.
Despite partnerships with pharmacies and supermarkets, Theranos avoided FDA regulation by not placing devices in stores, instead mailing samples to their lab. Thus, their devices didn't qualify as commercial testing equipment, escaping FDA jurisdiction.
How were labs like Theranos falling through cracks, regulated?
For years, such marginalized labs were state-reviewed under CNS authorization, but underfunded agencies merely went through motions. Elizabeth persistently claimed CMS and FDA certification. Her public FDA support made it hard for the agency to act against Theranos, especially given its political ties and closeness to the Obama administration. She appeared at the White House multiple times, even attending a state dinner for Japan's prime minister. But Elizabeth's lies didn't fool everyone. Pharma giants like Pfizer avoided it, as did healthcare-focused investment firms.
Theranos investors were typically healthcare outsiders, trusting Elizabeth's disruptive vision and endorsements from board members, celebrities, and heavyweights.
They assumed these smart people couldn't be fooled, making follow-on investments seem safe. Another common Silicon Valley mentality: FOMO, fear of missing out. After the 2009 U.S. financial crisis amid economic gloom, Silicon Valley boomed with Facebook, Twitter, and Uber. Cash-rich firms desperately sought the next wealth rocket. In this context, they'd rather choose wrong than risk missing out. Take Walgreens. Employees there questioned Theranos, but executives feared competitors partnering first, so they bought Theranos equipment at great cost.
Safeway faced the same dilemma. Decision makers worried about missing Theranos in case it truly revolutionized healthcare.
This explains how Theranos became Silicon Valley royalty without a core product. Internally, Elizabeth silenced employees through isolation, surveillance, termination, and legal threats. Externally, she charmed investors, packaged the company, and lied skillfully to non-medical partners. In 2014, at Elizabeth's peak fame, her turning point arrived, lasting half a year. Elizabeth was omnipresent in media, basking in entrepreneurial glory. But in December, a New Yorker report raised professional doubts. A medical blogger noted Elizabeth's shallow expertise. Her sole published paper covered just 6 patients' blood tests in an obscure journal. This blogger shared findings with a journalist contact, the Wall Street Journal's John Carreyrou, this book's author. What followed was the author's first-hand battle with Elizabeth. By then, Carreyrou had worked 16 years at WSJ, specialized in health reporting, and won 2 Pulitzer Prizes, America's highest journalism honor. When the blogger called, he'd read the New Yorker piece and felt instinctive suspicion. For example, no peer-reviewed data, Elizabeth explaining her device like a high school chemistry student. How to believe a college dropout with 2 semesters of chemical engineering could pioneer medicine. Unlike programming, it can't be self-taught in basements, but requires years of formal training. And most Nobel medicine laureates being 60-something isn't accidental. Their achievements build on decades of training and research. To verify his suspicions, the author began investigating. He first approached a businessman named Richard Fuiz, Elizabeth's neighbor for over 20 years. Fuiz made his fortune by patenting and selling inventions. When Elizabeth started her business without consulting him, his pride was wounded. He secretly patented a technology Theranos needed. 5 months later, Elizabeth discovered this and sent David Boies after him. Boies got one of Fuiz's sons fired and warned they could face Theranos' legal costs if they lost the lawsuit. By then, the Fuiz family had spent over $2 million on litigation. Continuing would bankrupt them. Ultimately, Elizabeth's proud, combative neighbor cried while signing the patent withdrawal agreement. Though Fuiz wanted to cooperate with the interview, his legal battle with Theranos suggested possible vengeful motives.
Thus, he couldn't be a credible source. The author then approached Theranos employees, but strict NDAs silenced them.
Dozens of messages went unanswered. Few agreed to talk, only anonymously or off the record.
But for the Wall Street Journal, an article couldn't rely entirely on anonymous sources.
When interviews stalled, the author flew to Phoenix, home to 40-plus Theranos outlets.
There, he found multiple doctors reporting erroneous test cases. His own comparison test confirmed Theranos' abnormal results. At this point, the reporter received an inquiry from Theranos' PR firm, forcing direct engagement.
The Wall Street Journal had a reporting principle: never publish without disclosing every finding to subjects and allowing ample response time. So the author disclosed his reporting and requested to interview Elizabeth and tour Theranos' lab head and headquarters, but this was continually delayed. Just then, his employee interviews achieved a major breakthrough. A young man named Tyler Schultz replied, willing to speak on record about his Theranos experiences. Tyler Schultz had the courage to speak out because he worried about patients getting inaccurate test results and feared for his grandfather's reputation. Tyler's grandfather is former U.S. Secretary of State George Shultz, also a Theranos board member.
Tyler believed Theranos would eventually be exposed. He wanted to speed up the process to clear his grandfather's name. What? Well,
Faithfully delivering value, interpreting great books from around the world. Hello, this is Sally's Book Talk. Today, the book we're discussing for you is Bad Blood, a nonfiction work with the subtitle Secrets and Lies of a Silicon Valley Giant. The protagonist of this book is Elizabeth Holmes. In 2004, she founded Theranos, claiming revolutionary technology that could run 250 medical tests with just one drop of blood, including cancer, blood panels, immune markers, and more. Her company became a $9 billion Silicon Valley unicorn in just 10 years. Elizabeth herself was hailed as the female Steve Jobs, with business and political heavyweights like former Secretary of State Henry Kissinger and media mogul Rupert Murdoch joining her prestigious board and investor lineup. Just as people expected Theranos to become the next Apple or Google, the truth began to emerge. Theranos' revolutionary technology was fictional. This business myth was a complete scam. After the scam was exposed, the unicorn collapsed overnight. Elizabeth surrendered and investors lost $1 billion. The book's author is Wall Street Journal reporter John Carreyrou, a two-time Pulitzer Prize winner. In 2015, Carreyrou published an article in the WSJ, first exposing the Theranos fraud. He then spent 3 years writing Bad Blood. The book recreates the entire Theranos scam and details his own process of exposing it. Published in the US in 2018, it was hugely popular and named a Best Book of 2018 by major media like The Washington Post, Time, The New York Times, and Book Review Weekly.
So how is this nearly $10 billion scam meticulously crafted?
How could a Stanford dropout girl with no medical background deceive a group of American business and political elites? What difficulties did the Wall Street Journal encounter in reporting, and what principles did they uphold? Next, we'll uncover Elizabeth Ann Holmes one by one. Born in 1985 into an elite American family, she was highly competitive from a young age and aspired to be a billionaire by age 9. Whew! That was at a family gathering where each child was asked what they wanted to be when they grew up. And Elizabeth said without hesitation, "I want to be a billionaire." The adult asked, "Why not become president?"
She replied, "No, the president will marry me because I'll have $1 billion." In 2002, Elizabeth was admitted to Stanford University's chemical engineering program with the highest presidential scholarship.
But in 2004, spring, just after becoming a sophomore, Elizabeth dropped out and founded. The company named Theranos was formed by combining the English words therapy and diagnosis. Theranos' vision was simple: design a portable product, allowing people to perform most blood tests at home with just a finger prick. Patients wouldn't need regular hospital tests, enabling doctors to adjust medication in real time based on their condition. Imagine this product as an advanced home glucose monitor, palm-sized but capable of far more tests than just blood sugar. This vision stemmed from Elizabeth's childhood fear of needles. She knew many shared this fear. Moreover, Elizabeth found traditional blood testing too inefficient. She wanted to make it faster and simpler. So with seed money from her father and neighbors, Elizabeth recruited a doctoral senior and launched. In a desolate California industrial park, she devoted herself entirely to entrepreneurship. Soon, her vibrant persona and ambition to revolutionize healthcare won over investors and industry elites. Employees from top firms like IBM and Apple, inspired by Elizabeth's passion and vision, joined her ranks. One employee poached from Apple said, "Elizabeth is passionate and knows what she's doing, exactly what you want in an entrepreneur." But Elizabeth's dream was too grand. In medicine, performing multiple tests with one drop of blood, had been pursued by thousands of researchers worldwide for over 20 years, but it remained impossible because different tests required distinct methods. A single drop couldn't suffice. Elizabeth's first product development lead was Edmund Koo, born in Hong Kong and renowned in Silicon Valley. Tech giants consulted him on complex engineering problems.
But at Theranos, Koo faced the toughest engineering challenge of his career.
The product Koo designed worked like this. Patients prick their finger, place blood in a credit card-sized cartridge, insert it into a reader, where a pump draws blood into microchannels for filtration and separation. Koo Tao, leaving plasma to react with antibodies. Chemical reaction results would display and transmit to doctors online, but Elizabeth demanded two non-negotiables: only one drop of blood and a compact machine, a nearly impossible task. Standard blood tests require 3 to 5 milliliters. Using one drop meant massive saline dilution, inevitably compromising accuracy. Additionally, miniaturization required designing non-interfering, contamination-free fluid pathways in palm-sized space. Reactions then had to occur through precisely controlled microvalves. Koo's team kept failing with expensive materials, quickly exhausting Elizabeth's patience. She blamed laziness and demanded 24/7 work. After Koo refused, the entire team was fired. Elizabeth hired a second team that finally produced a device. It modified Koo's design, keeping cartridges and readers, but used a robot instead of valves or pumps for reactions. But this robot was primitive, a mechanical arm on a frame with basic directional movement. In confined spaces, it couldn't achieve precision. Inaccuracy from insufficient blood volume remained unresolved.
Thus, testing the same patient twice could yield wildly different results.
If convicted, they face up to 20 years in prison, and Elizabeth must return at least $750 million in fraudulent gains. Latest update. In mid-1919, federal court delayed her criminal fraud trial to July 2020. That's essentially the core content covered in this book. Throughout the book, the author simply records facts without adding personal viewpoints. But in the final chapter, he wrote his commentary on this matter. He said that in Silicon Valley, there's a long-standing culture of over-promising, promoting products before they're finished. Because they lied from the get-go, they had to keep lying, hyping things up to get investment while covering up their actual progress, hoping reality would eventually catch up to their hype. This happens a lot in Silicon Valley marketing. But Elizabeth applied it to medical products. If an app flops, folks just get bummed out, but lying about medical stuff? That can be deadly. In the author's view, when Elizabeth dropped out of Stanford, she didn't mean to deceive investors or put patients in danger. Well, everyone believed in her genuine faith in a vision and threw themselves into making it happen. But at a turning point in Silicon Valley's funding craze, she stopped listening to smart advice and started looking for shortcuts. Her ambition got too greedy. She couldn't stand any questioning, even if chasing wealth and fame meant causing fatal harm to others. But whatever, the author thanks those who took huge risks to provide info. Oh, their courage came from an overriding care, protecting patients from harm. The author also thanks the Wall Street Journal for sticking to journalistic professionalism all along. From Murdoch to the investigative editors, they respected the truth and held firm against various pressures. It's the existence of independent media and regulators that stopped a flawed market experiment from going too far and hurting more people. All right, that's it for our interpretation of Bad Blood. The reading notes are below the audio. See you tomorrow.